You're listening to Dear Strategy, where we answer all of your questions on product and business strategy. And now, here's your host, Bob Caparelli.
Welcome to another episode of Dear Strategy, where we answer all of your questions about product and business strategy. Real questions from real people in real companies, just like yours. Welcome back, strategy creators, to another great episode. Going to answer a question in two parts this episode. Actually, we're going to do the first part this episode and the next part the next episode. They are actually two separate questions from two separate users, but it's around the subject of kind of implementing and executing a strategy, and it deserves more than just 10 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and answer it in two parts. So the first question, which I'm going to answer this week, is, Dear Strategy, how do you build programs, projects, and ultimately products out of a strategy once it's been established and accepted? How does it look from a complete holistic life cycle? So that's the first piece of it. The next question, by the way, which we'll answer next week, has to do more with how do you implement the strategies effectively. So what are some best practices around strategy implementation? So you can see it's kind of all around the same subject. But what I want to really answer this week is around the internal pieces, right? So how do you go ahead and get your internal funding and get all the internal pieces kind of lined up to be able to execute your strategy? And then on the next week's episode, I'll talk about implementation from more of an external standpoint. So how do you implement in the marketplace? So that's kind of the way that we'll approach this thing. So let's go ahead and talk about this first piece. So this question that we're going to answer on this episode really kind of has two subparts to it itself. One is around how do you build programs, projects, and products out of a strategy. And then the second is around the life cycle and how do you kind of keep that going within your company. So the first thing I'll say to the first part of this is every strategic plan has to have several different pieces to it to be successful and to give you a successful story. We've talked about this a lot on the show before, but in the process that we use at Strategy Generation Company, which of course is a company that sponsors this show, we have three basic cycles of strategy development. The first is your analysis cycle. The second is your planning cycle. And the third is your execution cycle. And in the execution cycle, what we ask people to do is put together an investment plan and a results plan, right? So in other words, we do the analysis of the market, the industry, the company itself, kind of the business that we have. We use all of that information to put together in our plan the goals, the options, the different actions. So ultimately, what does the strategy look like? But then we have to execute it. So the last part of our story is, what is it going to take to execute it? So what investment do you need and what result are you going to get, right? That's kind of like the last part of your story, which is also the part that's going to allow you to execute it. So to answer this question, what I would say is you need to make sure that you have that investment plan very clearly laid out. If you just have the first piece where it's just the analysis and the plan and you kind of end there, then you're going to have a much lower chance of actually turning that strategy into real programs, projects, and products, as this question asks. So what you want to do on that investment plan is lay out exactly what those programs, projects, and products are that you need to actually establish or build in order to make this strategy work. And not only do you need to lay out what those things are, you need to lay out a timeline. You need to lay out who is responsible for it. You also need to lay out what the cost will be, okay? And I would go even a step further and say whether those costs are going to be capital expenses or just regular expenses. So there's a lot of different things that you could do. Now, stop short of putting together a full-out business case, right? Because that's not necessarily what you want to do at this step. You don't have all of the detail, and you also don't want that to be a deterrent to actually putting together a good plan. This is still a very high-level investment roadmap that you're putting together. But what you're doing is you're turning your overall high-level strategic statements into more of a tactical plan. And some people will actually, call it this. They'll say there are strategies and then there are tactics, right? I personally say that there can be some confusion between those. We've answered that on this show before. We actually have another question in the pipeline that we'll answer it again in a little bit of a different way. But that is certainly one of the ways that people look at it is say, your strategies are kind of the high level, what it is that you want to do, and the tactics are the actual actions that you're going to take to make that plan succeed. I've kind of shied away from that differentiation over the years because I think it gets a little confusing. But what you definitely want to do is take your high level strategic initiatives and turn them into some type of a roadmap, some type of an investment plan. And on that investment plan, you have to outline what are the particular steps that you have to invest in. So once you have that plan, that's what you get approval for. That's what you get acceptance of. And once you get that high level buy-in of that investment plan, now you can go ahead and execute that in the form of individual business cases for each one of those investment items. So if you said as part of the strategy, you need to basically build 3 different products, you outline what those are, you outline when they're going to happen, you put together that high level investment plan as part of the strategy. Then when you actually get approval on the strategy, you go and you turn those individual pieces into individual development projects where you do full out business case, really put the numbers to it, really put the screws to those numbers, and then go get approval again for each one of those projects on an individual basis in line with your original investment timeline. So that's how you would make this work. Again, it seems a little obvious when you put it out there like that, but the truth is that a lot of people put strategies together without that last piece, which is that high-level investment roadmap. And then it's a lot harder to actually turn the strategy into those projects, programs, and products because there was no high-level investment plan ever put in place with the strategy when you presented it. Okay, so that's kind of part 1. Part 2 of this first part of the question is, what does this all look like from a life cycle standpoint, from a holistic life cycle standpoint? And this really comes down to making sure that your strategy is not just a one-time event, or I should say the strategy development process is not just a one-time event. You need to have a cadence inside your company where you're developing your strategy, you're executing your strategy, you're updating your strategy on a regular basis, and then you're going back to the table to present the plan on some frequent basis, usually on an annual basis. So any updates that you've been doing as you're executing get incorporated into that plan and then represented to your investors or executives or whoever else, so that you can give them a living, breathing look at how the strategy is being executed, and any tweaks or changes to your investment roadmap that you needed to make along the way, you could represent to that. So that's how this thing turns into a life cycle. Is you put your plan in place, you have your investment roadmap, you turn that roadmap into individual projects, and then you give people an update on that along the way. And the reason this update is so important is because, like any strategy, and we've talked about this a lot as well, whatever you planned on, that's not what's going to happen, right? Your plan is just that. It's just a plan. I've never met the strategy that isn't changed or tweaked somewhere along the way. In fact, I would tell you, you're not doing your job if you don't have some tweaks to your strategy along the way. Again, it's like playing chess, right? You make a move anticipating what someone else is going to do. They almost never do exactly what you thought they would do. Sometimes yes, but many times no, in which case you have to change your plan or shift around what you thought you would do. And so this is a dynamic process, and strategy is the same thing. So you put your plan together and then you start executing. You're going to find out that, the product I thought I was supposed to build, well, maybe somebody else did it already, or maybe I missed something, or maybe I was late, or maybe we didn't have the resources, or maybe I didn't get the approval for that project, or maybe it was going to cost me a lot more than I thought it would, right? Any of those things could happen. And so that causes you to go back to the drawing board. You need to re-update your strategy dynamically as those things happen. Now, one thing I would say is don't wait for the annual process to update your strategy. Update your strategy as things happen, but make sure that you go back to your executives or stakeholders on at least an annual basis to update them on what's going on so that you can tweak your investment plan and get reapprovals for anything that you might need. Once you get into that cadence and you get into that cycle, then you're going to find that your strategy process becomes an integral part of what your business does, and everything flows the way it's supposed to. So hopefully that is a helpful answer for the first part of this kind of execution question. And again, what we'll do next week is talk about how you implement your strategy, same kind of thing, but now we're going to talk about how we do it on the external part outside of your company and how you are going to implement it in the marketplace, which is equally, if not more important. So if you have any questions you want to be featured on the show, please go out to dearstrategy.com or dearstrategy.net. Click on the Ask a Question link and it'll take you to a contact form where you can get in touch with us. Also, please go out to Strategy Generation Company's website. That's the company that I founded, the company that sponsors this show. We can be found at strategygeneration.com, and there's all kinds of training and workshops and resources and different things that you can take advantage of, including individual coaching. If you're a company and you have a strategy that you need some help with, you want to have some external help to have you step through the strategy or step you and your team through a strategy, we are available to do that. So we hope you'll take advantage of that service and check us out for that. In the meantime, while you're checking all that out, don't forget to make time for the plan, and we'll see you back here on another episode of Dear Strategy. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for listening to Dear Strategy with Bob Caparelli. To learn more or to submit a question to be featured on our show, please visit us at dearstrategy.net.